has such similarity to rapid eye movement sleep. As far as we know, it's not the exact same brain state, but the similarity again is mind alert, body still, which is exactly what happens during rapid eye movement sleep. And we know rapid eye movement sleep is essential for formation of memories, for uncoupling of negative emotions from previous day experiences. It tends to be more enriched in the later parts of the night and so on. For me, Yoga Nidra is the practice to do when I wake up in the morning, but I don't feel completely rested. I'll do anywhere from 10 minutes to 30 minutes of that. And then in the afternoon, instead of a nap, I'll do Nidra, and sometimes I'll fall asleep, admittedly. And then if I wake up in the middle of the night, Nidra is my solution. I think that mind active, body still is such an interesting and frankly unusual state, unless we're in rapid eye movement sleep, that most people, until they try it, can't really appreciate the immense value that it brings. But the beautiful thing is it works the first time and it works every time. Yeah. Our mutual friend, Rick Rubin, we're both lucky enough to know him and to spend a little bit of time with him. And Rick has a practice that he does, I know because I went and visited him last summer, and he would just sit there with his eyes closed and his body very still. And at some point I asked him, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Well, I'm thinking." And I said, "What's the benefit of doing this?" And he said, "Well, I come up with ideas this way." And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And it immediately rung a bell. I had a guest on my podcast. It was actually the first guest ever on my podcast, a professor by the name of Dr. Carl Deisseroth. He's an MD and a PhD. He's the world's arguably top bioengineer in the field of neuroscience. He's also a psychiatrist, so he sees patients. And he also has raised 5 children. He's one of these phenoms. His wife's a neurologist at Stanford that, is a remarkable person, very deep thinker. And I was talking to him on the podcast, and he said that he has a practice whereby at night, after his kids go to sleep, he sits at the table or on the couch, stills his body completely, and forces himself to think in complete sentences for about an hour. And I thought to myself, whoa, that's a wildly unusual practice. And I said, what is it about? And he said, well, that's how I structure my ideas. That's where new ideas come to me. So Carl's doing that, Rick's doing that. You start looking back through history, you find out that Einstein had a walking practice that then my father's a theoretical physicist, so this is where I learned this, but presumably this is verifiable. I'm sure someone will tell me it's not true, but enough people have told me it is that I'm inclined to at least describe it, where he would walk, then stop and allow his thoughts to continue as if in motion. Mind active, body still, and then repeat. So this is a very unusual state of mind that I think has real value. And we know in sleep, rapid eye movement sleep and the associated dreams are where we work out a lot of novel solutions to hard daytime problems. And I can confidently say that the field of neuroscience can say so much more about the different states of the mind in sleep than we can about the states of the mind in waking. It's kind of amazing. It's 2024. Yeah. We know all this information about different brain areas. What happens when you stimulate this, these neurochemicals and that. And yet we have words, stage 1, 2, 3, 4, rapid eye movement sleep, slow wave sleep. We have real mechanistic understanding of the states of the mind and body in sleep, and very, very little language to describe like the state of mind that we happen to be in right now. So we can talk about hypnosis, which is a narrowed context, calm but alert, in which neuroplasticity, brain changes are more available to us. This is supported by clinical and research data. We can talk about being attentive. We can talk about being stressed. But if you think about it, it's not like very crude understanding. And so when I think about practices like body still, mind active, or even, something that I found immensely beneficial. Every Sunday, I try and take a long hike or walk, and I try and just let my mind spool out whatever ideas it happens to have. I like to think it's accessing some subconscious that's been, kind of packed with ideas and experiences during the week. But what do we call that? I call it a walk or a run or a hike. But I think that the different states of mind that we can go into during the day need more attention, not just from neuroscience researchers, but from people in the fields of meditation, people in the fields of health and wellness. What are the different states of mind? And so I would say that the last, really 40, but, 30 mainly, but 5 or 6 years of my life, I've been a public educator in the realm of trying to teach people ways to harness their physiology in ways that serve them best for mental health and physical health and performance. But I'm now starting to get very, very curious about how to evolve this thing that we call brain states and our understanding of, not just through language, but really understanding how to bring our mind into sharp focus, how to be in the best state of mind for connectedness, when to turn off empathy, when to turn on empathy. I mean, these are all circuitries within us that are possible. And of course, we have variation among us as a species as to whether or not we lean more towards logical thinking or empathic, affiliative thinking, these kinds of things. But, I really believe that, people like you, Jay, have an important role to play, and that the conversation between neuroscientists, people who have knowledge of meditative practices like yourself, there's real value in the overlap. And you said, that you were grateful that we're talking about these things, ancient practices and what they might mean. If I've learned anything, and I think I'm finally old enough that I can make that statement, if I've learned anything in my life, right, hopefully my life will continue, but if it, should I go someplace else before I anticipate, I think it's become very clear to me that whether or not you're talking about yogic tradition or you're talking about neuroscience or you're talking about traditional medicine or some of the more alternative medicines, the overlap in those Venn diagrams is where the real money is. And I don't necessarily mean financial gain. I mean, that's where the great ideas are.
Fully agree.
So I'm perfectly happy to talk about yoga nidra, NSDR, brain circuits associated, dopamine, basal ganglia, because ultimately, if I'm here to do anything, it's to try and bridge these silos and bring people's awareness to the fact that we've all been talking about the same thing and we're all seeking the same things. Safety, acceptance, creativity, these connectedness, purpose, fulfillment. These loftier ideals start with having our physiology in a place where we can reliably move forward, not have to worry about certain things. And then a little space opens up and so on and so forth. But I think there's a real calling now for anyone that's interested in the brain, anyone that's interested in health, and anyone that's interested in humanity to really start paying attention to the overlap in the Venn diagrams between REM sleep and waking states, between ancient practices and modern practices. And I should warn that person or those people, you're gonna take some heat, but ultimately the ability to go between these silos and to bridge them, as we're trying to do now, and hopefully are making some ground in this, I believe we are, is going to serve humanity very, very well, because it's just been too long whereby people are holding back knowledge, the secret of some chemical, the secret of some practice. There's no secret. The secret is they all work to some extent. The question is, what are the commonalities, what are the mechanisms, and what are the practices that allow people to bring their brain and body into the state that best serves them and other people? And it's accessible, but we have to have a slightly open mind about the language. We have to give up the ego, saying, oh, that's my practice, that breath work is the domain of my school or my thing. And frankly, those arguments aren't working anymore anyway, because information is so freely available on the internet. So in any case, there's a little bit of editorializing there, I realize, but it's also a calling to anyone that's interested in the mind and in the brain that, neuroscience is no longer the unique domain of neuroscientists. And I know that some of my neuroscience colleagues are gonna be like, oh boy, here he is, just as if it's accessible to anybody. I'm not saying you can be a neurosurgeon if you aren't trained in neurosurgery, right? But I'm not saying that you can be an advanced meditative practitioner without putting in the hours. What I am saying is that there's overlap in the Venn diagrams of these different fields.
For sure.
And the more collegiality